And I think if you listen very carefully, you can hear the sound of Monday's drinks trolley. Thank you, Sir David. You can just leave it there. Susie, what have you selected for us today from your trolley?
Well, as it was going past, I've grabbed, as you know, I'm a big Take That fan, so I thought, why not? Let's try Gary Barlow's organic red wine, blend of Tempranillo and a Syrah. And do you know what? It's not too shabby. It's quite nice.
Not too shabby.
Okay.
Take that and party.
You sometimes have an impression of what a celebrity wine might taste like, and I would say get rid of that. It was actually very delicious when I tried it.
I will be steered by you, of course, in all matters. Today's confession comes from Alan. He gets the smart speaker. Father Simon and the Confessional Collective of Care and Compassion. I seek your forgiveness for something that has haunted me for most of my adult life. I've tried to block it from my mind, but no. I fear I must come clean. Let me take you back to the mid-1970s. A simpler time with simpler tastes. In those days, we sat and ate as a family. Nobody left the table till their plate was cleared. Menu choices were also a lot simpler. Take it, or, well, actually, just take it.
Yes.
You cannot leave it. The only food I didn't particularly like back then was mashed potatoes. Remember, we're talking simpler times before potato ricers saved us from lumpy mash. I did not like mashed potatoes, and I absolutely detested lumpy mashed potatoes. On one occasion, our dish of the day came with lumpy mashed potatoes.
Oh, no.
I could not face them, but Dad was insistent. In a voice that sounded, I'm going to say, like Ray Winston.
Oh, again.
Even though we lived in Paisley, and he normally sounded like Billy Connolly.
Right.
He bellowed out the warning. Well, you're not leaving the table until your plate is cleared, my son.
Wow.
I couldn't do that as Billy Connolly.
No, you couldn't.
Dad cleared his plate. Mum cleared her plate. Even my goody two-shoes sister finished the meal. All three left the kitchen table and went next door to watch television, leaving just the dog, me, and a plate of, by now, cold, lumpy mashed potatoes. Now, I had a dilemma. I couldn't leave the room till the tatties had been disposed of, but remember that parenting styles in the 70s were also radically different.
Yeah.
I had to find a way of disposal that didn't risk punishment. I thought of the bin, but Dad was sure to look there. I thought of giving them to the dog, but if he didn't eat them, I'd be in trouble. Besides, the dog was looking at me with a, don't drag me into this. Have you seen these stuff they make me eat? Face. There was only one option. Could I? Would it work? Yes, genius. I stuffed the potatoes into the pockets of my school trousers.
Right.
Which I was still wearing.
Oh, good.
Finished, Dad, I shouted through to the next room in my childlike high-pitched, voice not yet broken, broad Scottish brogue.
Of course,
Too late for the stage directions.
Oh, so unfortunate.
The door opened. With a menacing silence, Dad looked at me and then looked at the empty plate. The dog looked away, trying to make himself invisible. The bin was duly opened. Nothing. Dad was baffled. He knew I wouldn't have eaten them. He knew that I knew that he knew. He stared me out, but I did not crack. Okay, you can leave the table. He reluctantly conceded in a voice sounding like Sir Alex Ferguson, manager of our local football team at the time.
Right.
Again, too late with the directions there.
No, never mind.
I had one remaining problem, though. 2 pockets full of mashed potatoes in my trousers. I excused myself and went to the toilet. My walk, though, was a little weird and squelchy. I considered trying to flush them away, but what if they didn't go round the bend? You know what that's like. To get caught out at this stage would mean that not even Esther Ranson could help me. 70s TV reference.
Yeah, thank you.
I took the only option available to me. I threw them out the window. Father Simon, both Mum and Dad are no longer with us, but that said, it's not forgiveness on their behalf that I seek. I don't seek my dad's forgiveness for my lies and subterfuge. No child should be made to eat lumpy mashed potatoes. I don't even seek my mum's forgiveness for wasting her food. She had the Fanny and Johnny Craddock cookbook collection. Mashed potato is not difficult to get right, Mum. I do feel bad about the trousers going into the washing basket, calling my bedroom floor in that condition, but my mum was expecting that kind of thing. Father Simon, I admitted one small detail. We lived 4 stories up in a tenement flat.
What?
And I seek forgiveness on behalf of the innocent passers-by who were hit
Oh, no.
by an aerial bombardment of MASH. I couldn't see who they were precisely, but hopefully they can just blame mutant seagulls in the paisley sky. Can you and the collective please find it in your hearts to forgive me? Well, I mean, I think it shows an awful lot of invention, a lot of creativity on Alan's behalf. What do you do with lumpy mashed potato? Sister Susie, what do you say?
Yeah, I think, Alan, you did really well there with your inventiveness and throwing it out of the window. That squidge, though, imagine that squidge in the pockets would just been... And imagine dried up mashed potato. Mum trying to wash those trousers the next day. Just not very nice, really. But I can't forgive you, Alan, for one reason. I love mashed potato. And I can't see why no one else would not love it. Lumps or no lumps. So therefore, I can't forgive you.
Harsh, but maybe fair brother from another
I mean,
country.
I also love mashed potato, but we shouldn't judge Alan for his wee blind spot on the potato. I think I'm going to forgive, and the reason is this. I mean, it's a perfect crime, really, is that no one was hurt other
Well, they
than the
might have been
people
the
with
people on the
mashed
ground.
potato. But frankly, it looked very much like seagulls, didn't it? And I know if I'd been there, I'd have thought, well, that looks like a seagull rather than mashed potato. So I think everyone was fine in the end, and even the dog managed to come out of it well. So what does he have to eat? I'm gonna forgive. Yeah.
Okay, well, it's 1-1 in the studio, like it usually is, so it's entirely down to you. Do you forgive Alan for his mashed potato crime? On the text 61054, first word is Simon. Tonight's confession came from Alan. It was called The Theme from MASH for obvious reasons. He hated lumpy mashed potato, but that's what he had to eat. And he got round his dad by putting it in his school trouser pockets and then chucking it out of the 4th floor window in Paisley, even though the Ray Winston voice kind of worked. I thought. Anyway. Alan, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the smart speaker. The people's verdict is in. It looks like this.
Everybody is forgiving. Jill in Galston says, totally forgiven. My brother and I did similar things once when Mum made spam fritters. I understand the angst of trying to get away with it. Andrew in Wales, of course forgiven. In my youth, I sometimes had a paper bag in my lap to receive the unchewable meat from the boiled beef and carrots that I had to consume at the lonely table in Nottingham. Don, the Norwich fan, says mashed potato is the food of the devil and should only be served to people who don't have teeth. And Steph says, I have to forgive. Best laugh I've had in ages. There's nothing worse than hard, lumpy mash. And the poor dog didn't even want it. Must have been bad. And we don't know for sure that it did hit anyone on the way down. Thanks for a great story.
Well, thank you, Alan. Not his real name. Bad family food. That could be
Definitely.
quite good. Family food that you knew you were going to get and were desperate to avoid. Anyway, maybe there's a confession in there. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. It's Greatest Hits Radio. Will Matt find his special book in time? Because he has a special book and a special pencil case.
Yeah, here it comes.
That he needs to find. Oh, no, we don't want that.
Oh, not that. Oh, this sounds better.
Bring forth the Drive Time Drinks Trolley, which today, Susie, what have you selected?
Well, I've picked up a very nice tipple from Iford Cider, which is just outside Bath, but it's actually non-alcoholic, so it is their whole apple juice and soda, and it's very nice because it's not too fizzy, so it's like apple juice.
Excellent.
With a little bit of a sparkle.
Grown up.
Very nice.
A grown-up soft drink is what you're
A
talking
grown-up
about.
soft drink, yes.
Thank you. Well, pass it round whilst we have today's tale, which comes from Nick. Thank you very much indeed for this piece of pop history. Simon and the holy team, purveyors of justice and forgivers of all bad things. Well, we'll find out, won't we, Nick? I need to confess, although I suspect this might be considered an unforgivable sin.
Oh.
I'm going to give it my best shot. I can only hope that Sir Bob Geldof isn't listening at this time, as he doesn't seem to be the kind of guy who you should annoy. And yet, I'm afraid to say that is precisely what I have done. Mid-year I could handle, but Sir Bob, well, I'm not sure, really not sure at all. So, when Band-Aid song came out in 1984, as you know, Do They Know It's Christmas?
Correct, yeah.
Like most teens, I wanted to buy the record because I wanted to help feed all the needy people in Ethiopia. I had watched the news I'd seen all the music superstars who had teamed up to make the record. So I went down to my local music record store to see what I could buy. It was full of teenagers, Father Simon, all trying to pay for their records at the same time. There were many top records being bought. This is back in the day when there were record stores to go to.
That.
I remember seeing fans in the queue of Limahl in their skunk-like hairdos buying Never-Ending Story. Wham fans in their ridiculous cut-off denim shorts buying Freedom. I mean, whoever looked good in that? Well, apart from Wham. And a few Status Quo fans in double denim.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe they were Shakin' Stevens fans, or maybe they were both. Who can say? Did you ever double denim?
No, I didn't. No,
I think I certainly did.
Oh, good.
Anyway, Father Simon, the shop was buzzing. If you remember record shops, you would find the sleeve. This is the way they worked. You would find the sleeve of the record in the rack. You'd take the record that you wanted, you take the sleeve from the rack, you take it to the till. There they would find your vinyl and insert it into the sleeve. You paid, you left. That's how it was. So I picked up my Do They Know It's Christmas record sleeve and I headed to the counter so the lady could find the 7-inch vinyl in her drawers and put the vinyl in the sleeve. Afterwards, I went out of the shop thinking I'd done a good deed. I had a piece of history and I'd been on the side of the angels. I was feeling super good and righteous for the only time in my life. So I got on the bus home. I couldn't wait, because everyone used to do this. You inspect your purchase.
Of course.
So I carefully pulled out the record, and to my surprise, the lady in the store had put in 2 records. I had 2 copies of Band-Aid in one sleeve.
Oh.
Now, obviously, I wanted to take it back to the shop and point out their error and give back the record so that the other record could raise more money. But thinking of how far away the shop was by now, this seemed a little impractical. And I was lazy. Anyway, I'd done my best to heal the world. Because we are the world, Father Simon. We are the children.
We are.
We are the ones who make a brighter day.
Yes.
So let's start giving.
Indeed.
And it was hardly my fault if the shop lady had been careless. So I realised I wasn't going to take this back. And then, remarkably, a miracle happened. As I got off the bus, I met a friend of mine who was also on the way, and he was going to the music shop. He was going to buy his copy of Band-Aid. Well, seeing this as an opportunity, I said to him he could buy my record off me, but with a 20p markup. Because I said my mother had already bought me one, so he could have it. Ingenious, huh? And remember, this is the 80s, and this kind of thing was part of the way the economy worked. I remember Wall Street. Greed is good. Remember that? The age of yuppies.
Yeah.
So I took the money and I gave him the sleeveless second record whilst hiding my own copy under my jacket. I walked home with my money and a free record, but also knowing that my friend was happy to get his record and he didn't have to go and use the bus. Carbon footprint, anyone? As we didn't think of in the 80s. What a result. It really was a miracle, don't you think? Divine acknowledgement of my genius. However, upon reflection, says Nick, and over many decades of guilt, I now realise that I did wrong in making a profit from a worldwide charitable cause and ask for forgiveness because I should have done the Christian thing and gone back to the record store. Every time I hear Band-Aid on the radio, I get a cold shiver down my back. Everyone remembers Live Aid with fondness, but not me. Woe is me, Father Simon. If Bob and Midge are listening, but mainly Bob, I'm very sorry, says Nick. Well, it is actually quite a shocking story because the whole point of the Band-Aid record is to raise money. And Nick, I'm afraid, has gone... Maybe this is the unforgivable sin. Let's find out, Sister Susie.
Well, Nick, it wasn't your fault, and you could have gone back to
It was precisely his fault.
He could have gone back to the shop, but he was a kid and he didn't have to go back on the bus again. So I understand why you didn't. However, I feel like you did your friend out of money as well because you gave him a copy without a sleeve. That's not what he paid for.
And 20p more.
And 20p more. And what I feel like you should have done is maybe donated the money to charity, which you didn't do. You pocketed it, so you profited from a charity, and therefore I can't forgive you.
I think that's right. I'll be very, very interested to see if the brother from another gutter can get away with forgiving Nick, who's done a terrible thing.
Well, I mean, we have to remember that the friend was prepared to pay the extra markup. You know, no gun to the head there. He was going, yeah, there's the money. So there's no problem there. And I mean, we don't hear from Nick whether he did give them. Maybe he did. Maybe he gave all that money then to charity. And
do you remember the row that Bob Geldof had with Margaret Thatcher about the VAT?
Yes.
That's the world we're in.
Well,
you're charging more for Band-Aid.
That we all remember that. But I'm pretty sure that if Bob and Midge and Paul Young and Boy George and the rest of them who are Bananarama, they were all involved. I'm sure if they were listening, they'd pretty much forgive as well. So I know that I speak for them, and they would have forgiven. So we're going to forgive too. Who are we? So definitely forgiven.
Well, this will be a very interesting one. Do you forgive Nick, please? That's the question. On the text 61054, start your message with Simon. The People's Verdict tonight on a Band-Aid rip-off. Just before the news, we had a shocking confession from Nick about how he had ripped off his mate by overcharging him for a copy of the Band-Aid record. He'd accidentally been given 2 copies by a woman in the record store. This could be the unforgivable sin. He doesn't really want to take on Sir Bob, but he could take on Lord Midge of Midgetown. So what's the People's Verdict?
Well, the jury split. No forgiveness here, says Gemma in Birmingham. Nick's friend was going to give money to charity, but ended up giving it to Nick instead. Very disappointing. But Josh in Winchester says forgiven. Ultimately, Nick's friend was willing to pay him for the record. The friend didn't have to take the long journey on the bus, and Nick also got some money. Win-win. But Vicky in Northampton says Nick has done a terrible thing. He's absolutely not forgiven. He knew he'd done wrong, and so at the very least should have donated the money he made to Band-Aid itself. And even failing that, this happened a long time ago, he could have at any time donated to a similar charity to make up for it, or purchased multiple copies of the re-releases. He'd had plenty of opportunities to put it right. Also, I didn't think even Spanish Matt would stoop so low as to forgive this one.
Matt forgives everybody. We absolutely know that. So, your confession, please. If you'd like to send us a tale, if we use it, you get a smart speaker. You send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Here we are then with Wednesday's confession. Let's just check in on the drinks trolley situation.
There it is.
Live from the saloon bar. What have you grabbed from the trolley as it went past there?
Well, I've grabbed a nice, refreshing Camden Town Unfussy lager, which is a bit like a German-style traditional lager, unfiltered, so nice and hazy, but very delicious. 4.9%.
4.9. That'll do.
All right, very nice. Thank you very much indeed. Today's confession comes from Nigel. Nigel, thank you very much indeed. You get the smart speaker. Simon and team, after hearing on many occasions your amusement at board rubber throwing antics of teachers back in the 1970s, I thought you might be interested in hearing how we, which is basically me and my mate Dave, rebelled against this. As chalkboards are no longer in use, I do not believe that this confession can influence today's pupils in any way, shape or form. So if imitative behaviour moves a film from a U certificate to a PG, which it does,
of course,
I would say that this is still a U certificate.
Oh, right, okay.
But that'll obviously be for Susie to decide, finally. I attended St Custard School
of course,
from 1967 to 1972. And during this time, had numerous board rubbers thrown in our general direction. That's me and Dave. And on occasions, we went home with big lumps on our heads. I know, different times.
Yeah.
Wow.
And times when this kind of thing was considered okay. Other things thrown included exercise books, textbooks, gym kit, lost property of all kinds, including Park Drive cigarettes and a plastic giraffe from a zoo. Remember, don't smoke, kids.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Anyway, on the day in question, the fun started when we decided to goad the teachers. Always unwise, but we started to talk loads. We ate cream buns, which we got from the tuck shop.
Buns.
When they finally launched the said board rubbers at our direction, we would dodge them because we were ready, and hence amuse the entire class and frustrate the teachers, who would try even harder and harder to perfect their aim. But board rubber after board rubber would hit the wall, a desk, or the wrong pupil. Yaroo, as schoolboys used to say. See Billy Bunter of The Remove for details. This continued for a few weeks, but eventually we got bored and went back to learning. Mouldy chiz. Anyway, this is where you might like to discourage anyone attempted to copy our disreputable behaviour. During a science lesson with Sigismund, the mad science teacher, we investigated said board rubber and came up with a plan to place a swan vesta match between the different layers of felt. In fact, not just one match, but quite a few. After returning the rubber to the chalkboard, we waited. Halfway through the class, the formulas had been suitably copied to textbooks. HCl plus NaOH equals NaCl plus H2O, as any fool knows. Halfway through the class, then it was time for the board to be cleaned. One wipe, nothing. Two wipes, nothing. Finally, on the third wipe, the matches ignited and flames burst from the board rubber. The whole class fell about the floor in hysterics as the teacher jumped up and down with a flaming board rubber in his hand. It was then suitably thrown across the room into an empty space. We retaliated against every teacher that had previously thrown board rubbers at us, as we knew it was against our human rights. Right. We were ahead of our times. Yeah. We never got caught, but I believe they knew who it was who was putting the swan vestas into the felt of the board rubber. I should like to apologise to my fellow pupils for the horrible smell of burning felt. I should also like to apologise to the beautiful young French teacher, Mademoiselle Bardot, who innocently...
Oh, come on.
Who innocently stood... Change the names.
Yeah, of course you do. Mademoiselle Bardot.
Who innocently stood in for an absent board rubber thrower, but she screamed and burst into tears as the rubber in her hand burst into flames. We never saw her again. Love, Nigel. And that's it. I mean, it finishes a little bit abruptly, but, you know, apart from that, I was intrigued with another stories of education in the 70s.
Yeah.
When we don't need no education was the cry. Anyway, potentially dangerous activities or just good school larks from St Custard's? Let's check in with the voice of responsibility, Sister Susie.
Well, Nigel, do you know what? It's never a good idea to goad a teacher, is it? It's never a good idea to goad anyone. Although I do, you know, the idea of the custard buns, the cream buns, were very delicious, and now I quite fancy
how
one of
annoyed
those.
would the teacher be if you're talking a lot and eating a cream bun during lessons?
Which school is selling cream buns?
St Custard's.
I know, it's excellent. Just
St
say
Custard's,
custards with a cream buns.
Right.
So yeah, custard slice and a cream bun sounds lovely. However, I have to say that matches, you should never play with matches. It's dangerous, and particularly putting it in a board rubber. I'm glad something didn't go worse, and I'm not going to forgive you because it could have.
Well, apart from the fact that Mademoiselle Bardot clearly gave up her teaching at St Custard's,
yes,
and a whole educational career might have been blown up by the explosive board rubber. A brother from another gutter.
Obviously, as Susie says, don't play with matches. That said, I think this is fine. And I'll tell you why. Because surely what we should take from this story is that Dave and Nigel have brought chemistry to life in a way. Nobody who's in that classroom is ever going to forget the impact of matches on a board, on a blackboard. And isn't it phosphorus in matches? Probably. One of those things. And that's a chemical element. So, you know, bringing it all to life. And Mrs. Bardot then went on to the movie career. So everything has worked out in the end for everyone.
No,
so definitely forgiven.
Okay, well, let's check it out then. It's entirely down to you. Your thoughts on Nigel's confession involving the explosive board rubber. Education in the 70s. What a to-do that was. Anyway, the people's verdict, please. 61054. Start your message with Simon. 61054. First word is Simon. So, today's confession came from Nigel, and it was a story from St Custard School, where he was between 67 and 1972, and how he and his mate Dave took action against the teachers who threw board rubbers by inserting a few matches in the board rubber so that when they wiped the board clean, the rubber sort of burst into flames.
Yes.
Anyway, that's kind of where we are with today's story. The people's verdict is in. Here it comes.
So Josh in Bury says, not forgiven. Playing with matches is never a good idea. Mick in Liverpool says, can't forgive Nigel, I'm afraid. Throwing board rubbers at students is an awful thing, but almost setting Bardot on fire is probably a bit drastic. Marion says, forgiven though. Many a board rubber thrown my way in the 60s. Part of one's education, learning to duck. And finally, not forgiven, says Simon from Norwich. As a chemistry teacher myself, it makes me cringe to hear of such misdemeanours. Also, chalk dust is actually quite flammable, and HCl plus NaOH
NaOH
makes with an arrow, not equals NaCl plus H2O.
But how would I have said that? You know, it's just easier.
Makes with an arrow.
Yeah, but that everyone would have gone, what are you talking about?
And I just said, oh, yes, that makes perfect sense. Makes with an arrow. So glad you said that rather than equals.
Anyway, who's that who sent that in?
That's from Simon in Norwich.
Well, I think, Simon, you should just have been very, very happy that we're talking about chemical reactions on the radio.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Anyway, if that has inspired a thought, maybe there's a confession from your school days, your science school days, your lost property school days, a plastic giraffe from the zoo school days. We would like to hear your stories. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. If we use it, you get a smart speaker. That's the deal. Equals the deal. Arrow leads to the deal. Thank you. Gather round. It's confession time then. Send yours to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. It's the David Jacobs Memorial Trolley being introduced very early. What have we selected as the trolley went past, Suze?
Well, I've gone for a nice large glass, I think, of rosé today.
Okay, which kind?
It's from France, and it's from Provence, and it's called Mayo. And it's very, very delicious. A blend of 4 different grapes, but super nice.
Very good. Half a pint for Matt.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Tonight's confession comes from Kevin. He's already got the smart speaker. Will he get forgiven? Father Simon and the Forgiving Few. My confession takes place in the year 2000. I was a 13-year-old boy, and due to some issues that I won't bore you with, needed to use an electric wheelchair for a time. Well, the excellent people at the Peter Alice charity were able to get me one, and of course, it being Peter Alice, it meant that it was going to be given to me at the 2000 Open Championship at St Andrews, the home of golf, as it's known. The way it works, Father Simon, is that the charity get businesses to donate a wheelchair to a deserving child. There were many different businesses all donating, from banks to slightly bigger banks. I found out that I was the only one getting my wheelchair from a sports team.
Okay.
And that team was Manchester United, who kicked off just a couple of minutes ago. He doesn't put that. I just made that bit up.
Well done. I mean,
to be honest, Simon, I can't say I was thrilled to hear this news, as I was and still am a Newcastle United fan.
Okay.
And in the 90s and the early 2000s, we were pretty good, but Manchester United always seemed to be just a little bit better and always beat us. But anyway, I needed this chair, so I just had to suck it up. says Kevin.
come on.
As we did say in 2000. Before I left, my best friend Richard, who's a huge Manchester United fan, told me to get anything I could related to his beloved club, like an autograph if I had the chance. So we arrive at St Andrews, and all the children are presented with their wheelchairs. And because my one was donated by Manchester United, they had sent a special guest to represent the club. They had sent the great England and Manchester United legend, Sir Bobby Charlton.
Wow.
Well, at first, Father Simon, I was quite awestruck to see such a great of the game, but it all went quickly downhill after Mr. Charlton asked me who I supported. Well, I said I supported Newcastle United. He then pulled a face and said, "Why do you want to support a team like that?" Now, looking back, Father Simon, I can see that the great Sir Bobby was obviously just having a joke and a bit of fun, seeing that he is from Ashington and his mum was a die-hard Newcastle fan, and his uncle was our club legend, War Jackie Milburn.
Yeah.
But to my 13-year-old brain, he had crossed the line. I was incensed. And being a 13-year-old teenager, I did what came naturally. I folded my arms and I sulked and said nothing.
Oh, no.
Clammed up. I shot him and anyone in my vicinity the dirtiest look that I could think of. I still have the picture of 20-odd beaming faces of children all sitting in their new wheelchairs, and me at the end with a face like thunder. In my sulk, I completely forgot about getting anything for Richard, and there was no way I was asking Sir Bobby for his autograph after he'd been so rude about Newcastle United. Well, I had two options as I saw it. I could explain to Richard what a child I had been and apologise, or I could fake Bobby Charlton's signature. Seeing as this part of the show is called Confession, Simon, I think you can guess what I did. I produced what I considered a work of art, using some stiff white cardboard and my best pen. Richard was so happy, he still has the signature to this day, and he still doesn't know.
Oh, no.
Here we are 23 years later. I'd like to ask forgiveness, of course, to Sir Bobby for being a moody teenager, and Richard for fooling him for all those years. I beg forgiveness. I mean, I always think these autograph ones are a bit shocking, because particularly when the people still don't know. So there's your best friend Richard. He got a Bobby Charlton autograph in Pride of Place, and it's a fake from your old chum. Sister Susie is shocked.
Yeah, I am shocked, Kevin. Like, I understand you being a moody teenager, and, you know, teenagers are moody, but, like, Bobby Charlton, you've got to be excited at meeting Bobby Charlton,
Yes.
regardless of what team you support. And you could have just said, I couldn't get an autograph. That's all you had to say. Whereas...
Because I was in such a sulk.
Yeah, because I was in a sulk, and, you know, you've got the picture to prove it, and I think that would have been fine. I can't believe he's still got it on your mantelpiece. No, not forgiven.
I just love the idea of Sir Bobby having a joke.
Didn't go down well.
And the 13-year-old going, right, you have definitely crossed the line.
Yeah.
I love the fact as well he refused to smile even for the picture. No, I'm still in the mood.
Yeah.
Really, everyone came out of this winning, didn't they? Because, you know, Kevin got the wheelchair, his mate got he got a autograph.
Fake.
You know,
Fake,
I mean,
a
it was a
fake.
fake autograph, but it isn't. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, surely, and he's very happy with his autograph. And, you know, Bobby Charlton, you know, Man United had just won the treble. They were going to win the Premier League the next season as well. They win the Premier League every year. Not so much now. Everyone's winning. So, you know, definitely forgiven.
A little bit of editorial
Yeah, there was,
coming
wasn't
in
there?
there.
Oh, dear.
It's the people's verdict. I can see which way this is going to go. Do you forgive Kevin, yes or no? On the text, please, 61054. You start your message with Simon, and we'll see where that goes. You might have a confession, it seems to me. You might have a golfing confession. You may well have an autograph confession. If you have, you send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. We had a confession before the news from Kevin, who, courtesy of a charity, was donated a wheelchair from Manchester United. But because he supports Newcastle United, as a 13-year-old, was very grumpy when Bobby Charlton made a joke about his team, as a result of which he was all surly, didn't get any autographs, but faked a Bobby Charlton autograph for his friend, who still believes that it's genuine until now, maybe. People's verdict, here we go.
So Summer in Cardiff says, absolutely forgiven. We're all very attached to the football teams we support, and Bobby should have been more sensitive to that before trying to make a joke with young Kevin. And Neve in Greenwich says, not forgiven. I can forgive the sulky teenager act, but faking the signature and giving it to your friend is such a no-no. And James in St Ives says, I totally agree with Matt. Everyone won in this scenario. Kevin got his wheelchair and the friend got his autograph. Win-win.
If you want to get your verdict read out, if you prefix it with I entirely agree with Matt,
Yep.
It's always a good way to start, even if you don't, to be honest. Your confession, please, whether it be about golf or autographs or famous people, whatever. We would like to hear it. Confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. If we use it, you get a smart speaker.